Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. Today's video is going to be on the short side. It's not the video that I'd planned to do today, but while it's short, it's going to be to the point. Most of you by now are probably fully aware of the colossal shitstorm that has sprung up over SirFoch's 1 minute 46 second long review of this tank, brand new upcoming premium, the Chrysler K Grand Final. Now, when I say Foch reviewed this tank, I'm being generous. Foch pretty much spent 2/3 of that 1 minute and 46 seconds embarking on a rant of biblical proportions against Wargaming, and only about 1/3 of that video length explaining why. Foch's epic rant, and it was epic even by his standards, Foch can be remarkably offensive when he wants to, but that's why people love him, that's his style, that's what he does. And epic though that rant may have been, and highly offensive, it would probably have been swept under the carpet within a week, if not for Wargaming's ridiculously heavy-handed and over-the-top response to it. Just to summarise, for those 2 or 3 of you who may not already be aware of what happened, Foch was asked to take the video down, he refused, and he was immediately told that if he didn't take the video down, Wargaming would pursue a copyright strike against his channel, demonetising not only the video in question, but every World of Tanks video that Foch had ever uploaded. And if you were to take away all of the World of Tanks content from Foch's channel, you would be left with exactly no videos. Unsurprisingly, Foch took the video down. Equally unsurprisingly, it's the fact that Wargaming threatened, they didn't go through with it, but they threatened to pursue copyright action over something that at best could be described as slander and defamation, that has caused everybody to lose their minds, and rightfully so, but that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. That's something I want to address at great length in Mingles with Jingles on Monday. You see, the thing is, with everybody losing their minds over the threat of a copyright strike, what most people appear to be forgetting in the signal to noise ratio is that what Foch said was actually 100% correct. His video's been taken down. It's no longer on YouTube on Foch's channel, but other people had managed to save it, and it has been re-uploaded to Facebook in particular. So if you want to see what has caused all of this fuss, then it isn't going to be too hard to find. And if you were to tune out all of the swearing and ranting in the 106 seconds that Foch devotes to this tank, and just focus on what it was actually about this tank that's got him so angry, I think you'll be forced to agree with the point that he was trying to make, even if the way he was making that point was less than diplomatic. I actually 100% agreed with what Foch was saying, even if I would never have phrased it in quite the way that he did. You see, the thing about this Chrysler K Grand Finals tank is that it's just another symptom of a problem that's been affecting World of Tanks for quite some time now. This tank is just the latest in a long line of symptoms of that problem, and the problem is the removal of frontal weak spots from tanks in this game. Arguably, the problem started over a year ago when Wargaming accidentally buffed the machine gun port armour on the top of the turret of the T110E5, which meant that that tank no longer had any frontal weak spots that could easily be hit without resorting to the use of premium ammunition. That was an accident that took them over a year to fix. And even after the fix, the machine gun turret on the top of that tank is still a remarkably tough target, and not really what most people would consider a weak spot. And so, for a long time, and arguably even today, if you're facing a T110E5 from the front at anything other than point-blank range, you pretty much have to load the gold ammo or find something else to shoot at. The next symptom of the problem was the German Tier 9 heavy tank, the VK4502P, a remarkably well-armoured tank, but it did always have that hull-mounted machine gun port. Now, it wasn't a huge target, but it was at least a weak spot that existed on the front of the tank. So, providing you knew what you were doing, and you were able to aim carefully, it was always possible to penetrate the front of a VK4502P without having to load premium high explosive anti-tank and just derp it right through the front of his turret. Well, that tank got remodelled, the weak spot got removed, and now if you want to penetrate a VK4502P from the front, you have to load premium high explosive anti-tank and derp it right through the front of his turret. Then of course we've got the Japanese Tier 9 and 10 super heavies, which practically require premium ammunition in order to be able to penetrate them from just about any angle. The mouse has been buffed, and if angled now requires in excess of 300mm of penetration to be able to reliably penetrate from the frontal aspect. And more recently we've seen the introduction of a couple of premium Tier 8 heavy tanks, this being one of them, but the first culprit being the Object 252U and the Defender. This is a Tier 8 premium heavy Soviet tank that when I reviewed I labelled as idiot-proof, which is a diplomatic way of saying brains optional in order to do well driving this tank. It's a Tier 8 premium heavy tank that has armour good enough to give Tier 10 tanks problems while engaging it from the front. And it's Tier 8, so it's also going to face Tier 6s, and if that tank can give Tier 10s problems when they're shooting at it from the front, what chance do Tier 6s have, even if they're firing premium ammunition? All of which brings us to where we are today, the Chrysler K, the latest overpowered premium tank, and this is an overpowered premium tank. Foch was absolutely 100% correct when he labelled it as such, but, well, the way he said it and the reaction from Wargaming caused everybody to lose track of the point that he was actually making. The Chrysler K is another premium tank that has no weak spots from the front. The turret of the tank has 254mm of armour, but that's just the actual armour thickness. The effective armour thickness is more like 300mm because of the shape of the turret. There is a very small Commander's Cupola on the top of the turret. And it is a weak spot, but it's only weak by comparison to the rest of the turret. It still has around 250mm of effective armour, and it's a very, very small target. The upper glacis of the tank is nowhere near as thick. It's around about 152mm, but it's very, very heavily sloped, which gives that 152mm of actual armour around about 260mm of effective armour. But that's just if the driver of the Chrysler K is facing you head on. If he has the slightest bit of sense, he's going to have the tank angled slightly. If he does that, that's going to increase the effective thickness of not only the upper glacis at the front, but also the side armour to something in the region of 280mm. But what about the lower glacis? It's got a big lower glacis. It does, but the lower glacis actually has thicker armour than the upper glacis. It's 184mm thick, and again, if angled, because what fool would not angle this tank, that's going to be more like an effective 250mm. And it's not that difficult to cover up the lower glacis. But what about those two machine gun ports at the front? Well, they're not even modelled on the tank. You can see them, and they look like weak spots, but if you were to check the tank out in a model viewer, you'll see that they're not actually part of the damage model. So, no frontal weak spots at all on this tank. So, no frontal weak spots on this tank at all. Doesn't matter how well you aim, there is nothing on the front of this tank that you can reliably penetrate without resorting to using premium ammunition. But it doesn't end there, because this tank encourages the use of premium ammunition both ways. You see, the gun only has 198mm of penetration with standard ammunition, but it has 260mm of penetration with premium ammunition. Now, in the interests of impartiality, I feel it's only fair to point out that while the penetration of the standard armour-piercing ammunition is not very good at 198mm, the gun handling stats on this tank are pretty good. Not the gun depression, it only has 6 degrees of gun depression, that's a consequence of having a rear-mounted turret on a very long machine. But the aiming time and the accuracy are pretty good. Very, very good. In the case of the aiming time, it's 1.84 seconds. The accuracy is 0.35, which isn't fantastic, but it's not bad. However, if you were to fit the tank with improved ventilation, have brothers-in-arms on the crew, and run premium cola consumables, you can get the aiming time down to 1.67 seconds, I think, and the accuracy down to 0.32, which is phenomenally good, and means that you don't necessarily have to fire premium ammunition in this tank, because it does have the accuracy and the gun handling statistics to be able to hit weak spots. The problem, of course, well, it's twofold. In order to get that kind of accuracy on this gun, you have to run with premium consumables, and you're probably going to have to pay to convert experience to get brothers-in-arms on the crew, all of which costs real money. The second issue with improving the gun handling stats on what is already a fairly good gun in that department is that it assumes that the tanks you're shooting at even have weak spots for you to aim at in the first place, and as we've established by now, that's increasingly becoming a thing of the past. And anyway, who's got time with things like aiming and learning where to shoot these days when you can just press the 2 key and have 260mm of penetration. So it is extremely likely that when you see these Chrysler K Grand Finals tanks out and about on the battlefield, and you are probably going to see a lot of them because it is a very good tank, it is increasingly likely that when you see these tanks on the battlefield, the air is going to be thick with gold flying in both directions. And of course, if you're expending a lot of gold ammunition, that means you need the income to support your ammunition resupply. So that means buying more premium tanks and buying more premium account time. And that is what got SirFoch so wound up that he went ahead and made the video that he did. I'm not excusing the video that he made, but I am just explaining it and putting it into some sort of context for you. It doesn't end there, however, because this tank is quite frankly ridiculous in more than one way. This is a heavy tank, and I don't just mean, heavy tank, medium tank, tank destroyer. It weighs 60 tons. To make up for the weight of the tank, it does have very, very good terrain resistance, and it has a reasonably good hull traverse. But it also has a 1200 horsepower engine, which means this tank has a horsepower to weight ratio of 20 horsepower per ton. And just to put that into context for you, that's exactly the same power to weight ratio as the AMX-30B, a French Tier 10 medium tank. In fact, it's nearly 4 horsepower per ton more than the Object 140 Soviet Tier 10 medium tank. It has a better power to weight ratio than the T-62A, than the Object 430, than the Centurion Action 10. I could go on, but I think you're beginning to get the point. And I hope Wargaming are starting to get the point as well, because this is quite frankly starting to get more than a little bit silly. This tank is going to be a handful for even Tier 10 tanks to deal with. What chance do you have in a Tier 6 or 7 regular non-premium tank even firing premium ammunition at this thing? The only way you're going to be able to kill this tank is if the rest of the team crumbles and allows you to get around the side and rear. Okay, that's probably quite likely to happen. Anybody who's played a World of Tanks random battle in the last 5 years is going to be able to attest to the likelihood of that happening. But all of the things being equal, this tank is ridiculous. I have no doubt that it's going to sell, and it's going to sell in huge numbers because it is very, very good. But that's kind of the problem. It's too good. It's far too good, and it's not the only one like it. We're seeing more and more of these premium tanks that are quite frankly ridiculous and really only seem to be there in order to promote the sale and use of gold ammunition and consumables, and therefore of course the sale of even more premium tanks and premium account time in order to support them. And I think people are really starting to get sick of it. So I genuinely hope Wargaming are paying attention, and hopefully this time, well, I've tried to be as professional as I possibly can in this review of the Chrysler K Grand Final, rather than just spewing bile and invective all over the keyboard, because while that certainly gets you attention, it's not always the kind of attention that you want or need. And I'll be devoting more time to going over that particular issue, SirFoch's video, and Wargaming's deplorably ham-fisted response to it in Mingles with Jingles on Monday. In the meantime, take care, enjoy your weekend, and I'll catch you next time.